Thank you for joining us for this next episode of Checked Out, the official podcast of Lancaster Public Library. I'm Theodore.
And I'm Amanda.
And we thank you for being with us again this month. We have a special episode. So last month, of course, me and Amanda, you saw us the entire time.
We battled it out
with the bracket. Exactly. Amanda technically won, although it was kind of an agreement, I would say. But this time, we have a special interview. We kind of realized that in the 6 months we've been doing this before the 7th episode, we have not focused at all on any of our other department, which is the children's department, which is an extremely important part of what we do. So, Amanda, who do you have on today?
Yeah, today we were so excited to invite Christine Landis, who is the manager of Children's and Teen Services here at LPL. You may know Christine directly, or you may have kiddos who are in the fan club for some of the people she manages, like Miss Shannon,
yep.
Mr. Jordan, and Mr. Josh. So we wanted to sit down with Christine today and get an idea of some of the things in Children's and Teen Services that we've neglected up to this point.
Exactly, because they do so much in that department. I mean, obviously, it's their programming, it's their story times, it's their builder's lab. It's so much that goes on in there, but there's also so much of their special lending items, and there's just so much that's happening all of the time, and we really wanted to focus on them and give them kind of a place to talk about.
They are the foundation of the importance of libraries in people's lives, starting with the kiddos, and we're just hoping to grab onto the adults that already loved literature.
Exactly. And I'm lucky enough that I got to sit in on the interview, so I actually got to hear it because it happened before this. And it was fantastic. So much good content there. So much information that I think is extremely helpful if you're unfamiliar with what that section of librarianship does. And I think you'll really enjoy it.
Yeah.
And so, of course, that means you won't see a lot of me this month, but that might be a good thing, honestly. So,
no.
So before that, though, of course, we have to start off with what we always start off with.
Dive into what we're reading.
Exactly.
You want to mix things up and maybe talk about what you're reading first this time?
Sure. So this is one of those situations where I scoured the new shelf because I just needed something that I was unfamiliar with and had absolutely no prior knowledge of. I like to do that with a lot of different art at times. So this is Herculean. It is by Grace Byron. First-time author. This is a debut novel, and I, of course, did not know that ahead of time. Really, it was a cover situation. It's green,
say that. Yep.
which is my favorite color. And there are, horns on a figure. It looks spooky. It was listed as horror, so I was like, well, you know what? It's April. That makes sense. So I'm going to go for a horror book right after Easter. It's actually really interesting, though, again, not knowing what I was kind of in for. I didn't realize that I was essentially walking into an American Midsummer, honestly. One of my favorite recent horror films. I mean, I guess kind of The Wicker Man, but still, it's a great film. It's extremely visually pleasing. And this is actually kind of in a similar vein with the cult situation that happens. The book opens up, and it's a trans woman who lives in New York City. She has night terrors. She seems to have, it's kind of like a sleep paralysis. She sees these figures. They typically don't speak. But the book kicks off with a situation and a quote that immediately kind of brought me into it. And there's a dark figure and a black suit and kind of like a frilly over-the-top hat. And she immediately asks it, so does Satan have a dress code? And I was like, it's a little quippy, which we have talked about before. But I don't know. It kind of struck me as being that fun kind of kitschy 1970s, 1980s horror. And it's definitely kind of delivered on that. It gets a lot darker later. she leaves New York to go to Illinois for this commune, essentially, and that's really where the Midsummer stuff starts to happen. It just devolves and devolves and devolves, and it's honestly fantastic. I mean, especially for a first-time novel, I'm really enjoying it. So
It sounds great. It sounds like something I might even try, even
Yeah.
though I'm not typically reading in the horror space a lot. But you talking about how it's that, 70s, 80s horror vibe. I
Yeah.
feel like even as someone that doesn't consume horror stuff a lot,
Yeah.
that it's that perfect balance of not taking itself too seriously, but
Yes.
still getting at the heart of the genre of like all of the fear built into it.
No, exactly. And I mean, it really, like, there's, as any good book would have, there's an underlying message of finding yourself, finding your identity, all of the different things that you might do to do that, good or bad for you. And it feels semi-autobiographical at times as well. I don't know a lot about the author, but even just the way it reads, there's a voice to it that sounds like it couldn't be from anyone else except this person, and I really appreciate that aspect of it as well. So
Yeah,
I've
that sounds
enjoyed it so
really
far.
good. Yeah.
It's good, and it'll be back on our new shelf shortly.
Yeah.
So what do you have, Amanda?
Well, as usual, nonfiction
course.
and fiction going at the same time. My fiction read this month is Whale Fall by Elizabeth O'Connor. You're going to like this one,
Okay.
Theodore. I could not wait to bring it up on the podcast, and I've
Yeah.
been saving it to talk to you about it. This is, first of all, a shorter, almost novella
Yeah.
length book, which we love.
Absolutely.
Has kind of Claire Keegan vibes, which we also love.
Also love.
And it is set in the late 30s off the coast of Wales on a remote island.
I'm
And
sold.
there's Welsh throughout the book that I'm like, Theodore would love this, but I'm like, please, could I get a vowel? Anyone?
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it is a wonderful story so far. I'm about 2/3 of the way through.
Yeah.
And it is story told by Manod, who is an 18-year-old girl living on this island. This is at a period of time, listening to different author interviews with Elizabeth O'Connor. She did a good bit of research for this and built in some things from her family's history of this is a period in time where a lot of these really small remote islands were either being evacuated altogether or their populations were just dwindling down to nothing because folks were going to the mainland to get more secure work and get away from the really brutal weather and living conditions on these islands where there's just nothing.
Yeah.
You're fishing and farming and being battered about by the wind and just hoping to scrape out a survival.
Yeah.
And Manod, as a young person, hearing what little she can about what's going on in the rest of the world, especially at this period in time when things are brewing on places that are not a remote island off the coast of Wales. She's really grappling with, do I stay or do I go? And how do I, not feel bad for leaving my family, but escape this existence that I don't want to be in anymore?
Yeah.
And part of her journey through all of that is two British ethnographers arriving on the island and starting to record the stories of the people who lived there. And the title comes from partially a whale washing up on the shore and everyone interacting with the washed up whale and watching its decay and all kinds of interesting parallels to Manod's story that you could draw there. But loving it overall, and I think you would too.
I'm really interested in that. Do you know where O'Connor is from originally?
I believe that she's British.
Okay,
But again, has some of that heritage that I think that she has one Irish grandparent and one Welsh one.
So
that
probably
both had,
pretty familiar.
I'll have
with
to find some of those
region.
author interviews I was listening to. I think
Very
one was
cool.
from NPR that specifically mentioned some of her influences for this book. But
I will definitely read that when you're done with it. That sounds fantastic.
Yeah, and shout out to Bound Books in New York for selling me this copy, which I will loan to you.
Very nice.
And then my nonfiction read is called The Great Secret by Jeanette Conant. This is kind of two stories in one, but the first portion of it is talking about a disaster that happened at a port in Italy during World War II that Allied forces had been accumulating some chemical weapons to use in the event that the Axis powers used them, because there had been
Yeah.
things brewing through intelligence that they realized this might become a very real part of the war, and they wanted to make sure they were prepared. But the Germans bombed this port, and there happened to be a ship carrying mustard gas bombs for the Allied forces
Yeah.
on the ship. And when the ship was destroyed, all of that mustard gas went into the water, along with all of the fuel and oil and all of the other lovely
Yeah.
things. And the soldiers and civilians even that were involved in this whole disaster started getting sick and dying at an alarming rate. And the doctor that was brought in from a special team to start to care for these soldiers and try to figure out what had happened,
Yeah.
realized that there must have been a chemical agent involved.
Okay.
But the Allied forces did not want to admit
Yep.
to having those weapons, and the major disaster that hit. I absolutely understand why they wanted to protect that secret, because if
Yeah,
the
in the
Germans had found
context.
out
Yeah.
that we had brought it would have just encouraged them to actually use chemical weapons
Yeah,
in the
probably
war.
cause more deaths. Yeah.
But this doctor trying to get people like Winston Churchill to admit that this happened and we need to take it seriously, because that affects the treatment for the people who
Yes.
have been very much affected
Yeah.
by this disaster. But the second part that I haven't quite gotten to is that out of all of this doctor started noticing that while this chemical agent was killing off a lot of people, it was also curing certain things. So this is the genesis of some chemotherapy. That the effects
Okay.
of the mustard gas
Yeah.
started to cure certain cancers, and it eventually led to a partnership with Sloan Kettering. And so this terrible chapter in the war ended up having a lot of good for a lot of people.
Yeah.
It's really fascinating. I'm a
That's
big
actually very
World War II
interesting.
history lover. So
Yeah.
this is a really interesting story that I'm excited to get through the rest of it.
Well, and it's an interesting link as well, because they could have just focused on that massive disaster, but to kind of not necessarily put a bow on it, but to at least tell that other story, and to show kind of this link towards modern treatments even for
Yeah.
cancer is really interesting. That's a
Yeah,
cool link.
really
Yeah.
fascinating, and I've already recommended it to several people who I know will love it. So
That's awesome.
I have 2 highly recommended books this month.
Very nice. I cannot wait to read Whale Fall. I think that's going to be
Oh,
right
for
up my
sure.
alley.
Yeah.
Sounds like it. Very nice. Cool.
All right.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate you loaning me that book when you're done. And I appreciate you interviewing our manager of Children and Teen Services, Christine Landis. So should we head on over to that?
Without further ado, let's go.
Perfect. All right. Thanks.
Christine, thank you so much for joining us today. We're so excited to have you as a guest on Checked Out. Now, how many years have you been with LPL again? I know I started after you, but
Yeah, I started in 2023. So right as the library was opening, I started, and but this is my 4th summer reading. So I tend to count my tenure here as in summer reading, because that's so intense for us.
I feel like everything within the children's and teen services world operates based on summer reading, and then how exhausted you are by the end of it, almost like being ruled by the school year within the academic world, right?
Yes.
Which is pretty similar to your old job then, yes, I suppose. Since
Yeah, I
you-
mean, it was very intense for those school months, which was 9 months. This is just a very intense 10 weeks. But yeah, similar. And it's the opposite of what I'm used to. I used to relax in the summer.
Because you came from school librarianship into public librarianship,
Yes.
correct? So could you tell us a little bit about your journey to librarianship, and then through that transition of one kind of librarianship into another?
Yeah, sure. So, like most people who are readers, I've been a reader for a long, long time, always loved books, took a totally different path though in college. Was an economics major, and now I think back, why wasn't I an English major? But anyway, eventually became a teacher after working, and while I was raising my children, went back to school, became a teacher. I worked as a teacher for 25 years, 13 of that as a school librarian. So as I was working as a teacher, I just found myself always gravitating towards language arts. I used to love to use picture books in all my lessons, especially my social studies lessons, to supplement the curriculum. And I thought, well, why don't I do this more? Because this is what I really love. So I went back, got my library certificate for teachers, and became a school librarian. I was a librarian for 13 years. I'll give a shout out to Lidditz Elementary School. And then retired from there in 2023 and took this job.
What prompted the switch into public libraries then? Transitioning from a school into...
Well, I think, it was always in the back of my mind that this was something that I could go into when I felt that my time of teaching was over. And I think after, as a lot of teachers will say, after the pandemic, that was really a watershed moment for a lot of teachers. And it just got to the point where I felt that I could make a better contribution in a different career. It was time for younger teachers, younger school librarians to come in and take over the reins, and that I would try to do something else.
And that's a good philosophy that I feel like applies to public librarianship too, of giving that room for new blood and new ideas, and maybe stepping out of some really stressful positions and transitioning to a different part of library work. But I feel like you stepped into a new kind of chaos coming into children's and teen services.
I mean, I think any job has its down moments, its quiet times, its busy times, its stressful times. And yes, I'm not teaching or doing 7 story times a day, which I used to do, but I'm doing other things that also require a lot of time and brain power. And so I still feel like I'm in it, but in a different way.
Well, and you're still getting that fulfillment of helping children and teens through another type of library work. Can you speak to that a bit, of your experience over the years, of the difference that libraries and literature make for young people?
Yes. Well, I mean, I think sometimes it's hard to pinpoint it at the moment when you're doing it. Like, you're teaching lessons in a school and you're like, are the kids really taking this in? Is this making a difference to them? But then, they might come back and they say, oh, I really enjoyed this book, or I've read all of Avi's books now because I started reading them here. Or they might notice something, like we used to do a lot with media literacy. And so they might point out something that they noticed, that this was a fake website, or when they're using research in new ways. So I think you see the effects after the fact, whereas here it can be pretty immediate. A patron comes in and they're looking for the next book in the series. And I'm so excited when I say, yes, we have it. It's on the shelf, especially with Diary of a Wimpy Kid, or the next Dog Man's coming out and we have it. Or when you can say, oh, my son, people come in, my son's read all these books, and when you can suggest another series and the family's really happy, or they come back and they say, oh, we love that series. Can you have more? That's so satisfying. I love that. I mean, even just when adults come in and they want help and I can help them find the movie that they're looking for, that's just really satisfying.
Yeah, something that's going to continue that love of reading for kiddos, or help adults find something new. And it seems like, from what you're describing, you still get that relationship building part of library work too, of obviously students that you're seeing day to day in a school, but all of those families that come in here regularly, or the ones that are at story time every single week, or come for their weekly library trip. You have that same opportunity to build a rapport with them and become a part of their child's life.
Yeah,
it's really special.
It is really nice. And to see them moving on from, picture books to early readers to early chapter books, and seeing them progress is really nice.
Yeah, so I guess that plays into how important books and libraries are for children and for their grown-ups, of what what impact do you see that having on young patrons and their grown-ups?
Well, reading is so important to build empathy and to see your own struggles and successes reflected back at you, to learn about other cultures. So, getting families started on that road I think we have a great collection. Our collection development person, Sue Robinson, does a great job starting with the board books. So we have board books on all kinds of topics, building that love and trust, when you have your child on your lap and you're first starting to read. And that just keeps growing. And then letting parents come in and they're like, oh, I love this series as a child. Do you still have this series? Sharing it amongst generations, passing down favorite series. Or sharing, they want to read it together so that they can still talk about things. And I think, that kind of drops off a little bit in the teen years, but still seeing families coming in together and looking at books from all levels, even in the YA department, and talking about books that they want to read and talking to their children about books. It's a great conversation starter especially for some of those hard topics that kids have to deal with.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, conversation around books. I'm the daughter of librarians, so obviously it took place in my house. But through childhood to adulthood, that's a really special part of our relationship. And then thinking about what you're saying and even how it applies to adult services, if we see both ends of the spectrum then, people's experience with books and libraries throughout their life. If we see the adults that did come in for children's programming with their family and had that weekly library trip of it's still an important part of their lives. And then we also see people who may not have had the same experience, and literacy is something that they're reaching for in adulthood. And it always drives home to me when I'm working with patrons who have that experience of how important the work that you do is, that you're building that foundation with the patrons that are coming in at that young age so that they can have that head start in life to save them some of the struggles that we see with some of our adult patrons. And it's just a good reminder of how important every piece of the library staff puzzle is.
And I also want to stress too, we'll get people upstairs. Sometimes adult patrons will come back and they want to revisit some of their favorite books from childhood. And, they would share stories. I used to always come to the library as a child, and I always say, well, welcome back. It doesn't matter if you haven't been to the library in 5 years. We don't care. Yes. Come back and see what we have now, because libraries have really changed as well.
Absolutely.
And so we don't mind if you haven't been here for 5 years or your card has lapsed. We'll get you a new card. Just come back and see all that we have to offer.
Yeah, no matter how long it's been, the library can always still be home.
Yes,
right?
Definitely. That was very eloquently put.
Oh, well, thank you. Thinking about the books that you're recommending and childhood favorites for some people that stick with them even into adulthood, that's for people who had that love of reading and then maybe it stayed with them or they're returning to it. But something that we also hear a lot, and direct people over to the experts in the CATS department, reluctant readers. Do you have any books or series that you automatically gravitate towards to help kiddos start establishing that love for reading?
Yeah, and I did think about this question. I was taking all my kinds of notes here. And I always try to start out with asking some questions like, oh, do you like funny stories, serious, sports? Like, what are your interests? To find that first. Yeah. But, we all think of our classics, Dr. Seuss and, maybe Madeline, but there's a lot of modern, more recent authors like Mac Barnett, John Klassen that I love to recommend because Jory John, they're funny. There's that adult humor that you get in there to keep the grown-ups interested after the 10th reading, but they've got great illustrations. So I always try to find books that have great illustrations, maybe a little bit of humor, or, a cat story is always good. A dog story is always good.
Shout out to Dog Man.
Yes, definitely. But I really I think graphic novels have totally revolutionized life for reluctant readers. And so, parents will come in like, well, do you have anything that's more of a chapter book? Like they're ready to move their child along from graphic novels. And as a librarian, then you realize that there's adult graphic novels and YA graphic novels that the language is just as complex as a regular text.
Yeah.
But I like to start off with graphic novels for reluctant readers. And we have graphic novels for all levels, starting with early readers all the way through to chapter, like what you would be a chapter book, really.
Capturing their interest, but it feels like it's almost like putting veggies in food.
Yes.
The way parents hide it that way, it's like,
Right.
let's hide really complex language inside a book with really cool pictures.
Right.
So that you turn out to love reading and you
Yeah.
didn't even know what was happening.
And it breaks down some of those barriers, like comprehension barriers that kids might have, or even just they think they're going to have trouble. But once they see that they don't, that they get it, then they can always transition to other books.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great strategy, and I feel like I could use it on adults too now. If you say that you're trying to get back into reading, maybe try a graphic novel, because that's a little more visually interesting. And then when you find the kinds that you like, maybe we can find you some chapter books that have similar themes.
Well, along that line, I would put a plug in also for nonfiction. So for a lot of YA nonfiction, or they'll be like the young readers edition. I've learned so much nonfiction or like historical fiction by reading historical fiction at the kids and YA level, or the young readers edition of books has been a great entry point for me because I'm not a huge nonfiction lover. And some of those adult nonfiction books are really thick, and I'm like, oh. But if you're interested in knowing what's happening, look for a young readers edition in the children or the YA room and read that. And then if you are interested, then you can go back to the adult version. There's nothing that says a grown-up can't read a kid's book.
Oh, absolutely.
So-
And that's a really interesting angle on it, because I do often refer people to the children's and YA nonfiction when they're like, I just wanted to start learning about this topic. Where do I start? And that gives you the summary of things. But even from a reader's advisory perspective of like exploring different topics in a whittled down, more concentrated version, and then you can explore those interests in more of the grown-up book space. I'm definitely going to save that. See, librarians learning from each other all the time as soon as we get chatting. So reluctant reader tips there, but I'm sure that you have lots of kiddos that absolutely eat up books too. How do you keep finding new things for them that you know they'll enjoy when they've already consumed half the collection?
Well, and the thing is, too, is I can't possibly read all the new stuff that's coming out. So I think finding those websites, reading all the press releases, and trying to keep up with what's popular. And then, I can't imagine a better work environment for people who love books than the library, because everybody you work with is willing to have these conversations. So then just talking to the other people you work with and finding out what they're recommending, what they're reading, what they've heard is a great way too. Because, reader's advisory is a huge issue because you can't read everything.
Yeah. And part of the nice thing with having a staff full of people that love to read is that we all have different reading tastes for the most part. So then in a genre that you might not read in regularly, you have a coworker who absolutely loves that genre.
Yes.
And has all the recommendations to give you. Or things like if a teen wants fantasy YA series recommendations, I'm not really reading YA books, but I know that we have a cat staff full of people that read YA all the time. So there are other people who can jump in and give that recommendation, and they know firsthand it's something that the patron is going to love.
And I think talking to patrons. So when patrons come in, and asking them, oh, what did you think of that book? Or, did you like it? How would you compare it? Starting those conversations with our patrons, or, patrons start the conversations with us. Like, this is a great book. You should recommend this to other kids or other adults, is great for us too.
Yeah. Who needs things like Goodreads when you just have conversations with patrons as they return
That's
things,
right.
right?
You don't need another app.
Right, yeah. And conversations with patrons makes me think, too, of all of the things apart from books that patrons rave about when they're returning things or flipping through the binders of games. Of what are some of your non-book items in the library that are your favorites, like best kept secrets of the library has this and everyone loves it?
Yeah, well, I don't think this is a secret, but the American Girl dolls. I mean, those are by far and away our specialty item that gets checked out the most. Yeah, like the girls are resting right now because they're going to be busy this summer. They're going to be checked out and played with all summer long. I think that's great. I think the telescopes are great too. I mean, especially now with a renewed interest in space exploration. We have telescopes that people can check out, and the Explorer kits are great too.
Yes.
And kids love them because they really do look like a little Dora the Explorer or her brother.
Here's
It's
my
like a
safari
little
bag.
it's a little safari bag, and it's got everything you need in there for a trip to the park and to look at all the bugs and flowers you want, and to get your child started appreciating the natural world and just, trying to identify the birds in your backyard. So I think those are our big ones.
The birds and things I can get behind. It's the bug one that I have to stay away from. I know that they're great creatures, but I'm not going to explore the bug world. Thank you very much.
There's nothing like a fresh worm.
Right. Yeah. Nothing like it for sure. Apart from all of the different items and things we've talked about, conversations over American Girl dolls or books that people have loved, all of those conversations over the years, is there a particular library story that stands out in your mind of something that really impacted you when you heard back from the patrons about an experience?
I don't know. There's probably just so many. Yeah. It's hard to know. But yeah, I think it's just
all of those
hard.
Little moments over the years.
Yeah.
Things like people coming back in and talking about, I loved this book in childhood, and now you're reconnecting them with it. Or even kids being excited over certain books and the parents say, recommend this to other people. It's all of those times of seeing the difference the library work makes.
Yes. Yeah. It's hard to come up with just one. I mean, certainly we were talking before this about like funny stories of things that happen,
It's true.
And there have been a few little things, even, as a teacher too, you get a few of those little experiences, but
the sensory toy that explodes and there's blue goo all over the
carpet.
Right.
Or, when slime was really big and who got slime all over the carpet or things like that.
Yeah.
I always say I never appreciated sparkles until I really had kindergarten, because I had sparkly shoes one time, and I think that really elevated me in their eyes.
Trail of fairy dust as you walked. Your teacher really is magic after all, right?
I remember I had never taught kindergarten. The lowest grade I had ever taught was third grade. So when I had kindergarten the first time, and there was this one little girl, and she's like, "Where are the Blue Princess books?" And I'm like, Blue Princess? I don't know. Where are the Blue Princess books?
Your first encounter with Reader's Advisory,
yes.
But I don't know what this cover is.
Exactly. It was like my second day as a librarian, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is going to be hard.
That's a great segue for, I was also going to ask, what's the most challenging part of librarianship? Is it finding the Blue Princess books, or is it something else?
Yeah. And, I think I'm going to rely on, as I get older too, like I've read a lot of books now, and I'm getting to that stage where it's got a yellow cover and there's a dog with a red bow on the front kind of stage of my life where I know a lot of these series or half plots, but I just can't quite always get it right. So that's kind of getting harder for me as I go.
feel like that doesn't bode well for me because I'm already at the point that I can get to chapter 3 and be like, wait, I read this book already. And
Yeah.
need to set it to the side.
Right.
So, oh no. More to look
Yeah, and
forward
just
to.
trying to remember all the books that are out there. As a librarian, one of your classes is like, studying all the history of like children's publishing kind of, and all the Newbery Awards that have happened. And I think we're just at this kind of golden age of children's publishing where there's so many great creative people out there. They're publishing books. The books are really engaging, and it's hard to just keep up with all of that.
Yeah, and it's being taken seriously in a way that I think it wasn't necessarily before. And
Yes.
it's exciting to see a lot of creators really making a name for themselves in the literary world, not just children's books, right?
Yeah. And you do have a lot of crossover. They're writing adult books and children's books, and vice versa. Children's book authors are now venturing into the adult world as well.
Yeah,
So,
and it's exciting to see authors explore those different types of writing and seeing, maybe this sounds a little bit mean, but seeing how they tackle the challenge and some of them doing better than others, but giving them that room to speak to a new audience and watching them really flourish in a lot of examples.
Yes.
It's really cool. Well, it's been delightful to have you on.
oh, thank you so much. I'm glad I finally got my turn.
We were so excited when you agreed to talk with us today, and I feel like talking about books here right at the end, we can't let you go without talking about what you're reading right now. So, are you working on children's books, or are you working on grown-up books right now?
Well, after so many years reading children's books, I have been mostly concentrating on adult books. I'm reading Raising Hair right now by Chloe Dalton. It's about a woman who found an abandoned baby hare. And they're very different from rabbits, I'm learning. They're nothing alike. And she lived in England, and it's how her story during the pandemic when she was raising this baby hare. And so it's a very gentle story, but it's full of information, and it's one of those nonfiction books where you're learning so much, but you don't realize you're learning anything. And as far as children's literature, I have grandchildren, so right now I discovered Tow Truck Joe. He's really great, and of course Elephant and Piggy, can't go wrong with that, and a lot of early readers. So I'm always, when I see a great cover with a cute dog on it, I can't resist. So a lot of books like that
Got
for
a variety
kids.
going on. I like that. Well,
Yeah.
maybe I will have to look for Raising Hair and potentially Tow Truck Joe.
Well, and
just to
Tow
see
Truck
what it's
Joe's a
like.
5-minute read for you.
Okay,
So
perfect. Oh, well, thanks again, Christine.
Yeah,
Really
thank you so
appreciate
much
you
for
coming
having
on.
me.
Yeah, of course.
All right. Well, thank you for doing that interview, Amanda. That was honestly fantastic.
course.
Just like I said earlier, it was just great to hear a different perspective because not that librarianship with adults and children is completely incompatible, but what we do every day, the kind of problems that we solve every day are definitely a lot different than what is dealt with up in the children's section.
Yeah, very different things for sure. No kid is coming in and saying, "Can you tell me what my Gmail password is?"
Yes.
But it was interesting to talk to Christine about how our work goes hand in hand and builds off itself as people age. And
I think that was the best part. I mean, obviously, as you two were doing that, I was recording, so I was watching waveforms and things like that. But that is where, even in all of that, like my ears perked up. I really liked that link from, from the cradle to, hopefully not the grave. Let's not talk the grave. But but how we can guide people through their entire life with new information, new art, new books, new experiences.
yeah, and even that nostalgia factor of adults coming back into the children's room and saying, "I loved this book in my childhood. Can you help me find it again?" We're just all one, I don't know, big group of people loving books and flowing from one department to the other and celebrating everything that libraries bring to us. So.
Exactly. No, it's fantastic. And, I think, a lot of people who don't work in libraries or aren't super familiar with the inner workings might not understand why there even are separate departments or why one librarian isn't doing literally everything. And in a smaller library, you might see that, but it's definitely because in a place like this, I mean, if you've come to any of Miss Shannon's story times, you see how animated you
She's
need to be.
putting on a show
She's putting
that
on a
I could never
show.
equal. Yeah.
No, and I'm definitely a bit more of an extrovert, but I've done a story time or two with her just like to add some music to it, and it's very
They
difficult.
wore you out.
It's
Yeah.
difficult to get into that headspace that she gets into. And in the evenings, I don't know if you've ever seen it before, but you can actually see her prepping in her office, like with the door closed.
Yeah.
And I absolutely adore that. They're, again, it's the same goal at the end of the day, but they're very, very different jobs. And I just, I always have a great appreciation for people who are doing a similar thing, but that I kind of probably can't do myself.
Yeah,
And that's definitely
yeah.
the children's department.
That these groups of patrons have very different needs, and
Yeah.
it's really cool to see our different staff members all use their own skills and talents to serve the people that they're working with. And yeah, it's really
Exactly.
special.
It really is. So on that note, I think we're going to wrap it up for this month, but we'll be back in about 4 more weeks. I want to thank everyone who came out to Earth Day, which will be the Saturday before this episode comes out. We put a lot of work into it. We have a lot of great partners coming, so thank you for everyone who did come. And if you're one of the first 50 who came, I hope you really like that poster because I'm looking forward to it myself. So, all right. Have a great day. Thanks.
Thanks.